Welcome to Hockey Nights in Vegas, episode 93. My name is Eddie Rivkin. I'm joined as always by Chris Chapman of Fox Sports Las Vegas and the Golden Knights pre- and post-game show. This episode, like all others, is brought to you by the Las Vegas Advisor at lasvegasadvisor.com, by Dr. John Pierce at agelessforever.net, and by the best multi-purpose attorney in all of Las Vegas, Joe Riccio at the Marathon Law Group. You know how Chapman gets a chance to go and see games and have beautiful backgrounds like T-Mobile when his New Jersey Devils are visiting? That's Joe Riccio, folks. He keeps him available for the Hockey Nights in Vegas podcast. Chat, before we start, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for a couple of days, and I feel like I need to get it off my chest. You're a loyal, lifelong New Jersey Devils fan. If you watch the podcast, you know I'm a homer for the Detroit Red Wings. The Detroit Red Wings fired their coach, Derek Lalonde, the day after Christmas. It was a move that was pretty well necessitated by their incredibly poor play, but that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about ownership and management and culture. The Red Wings made the playoffs for 25 straight years when their owner was Mike Ilitch. Unfortunately, Mr. I passed away a few years ago, and like all people with kids, the team got passed down to his son, Chris. And the reason that the Red Wings waited so long to fire their head coach when he was deserving of it probably 20 games ago is because the son, Chris Ilitch, didn't want to pay two coaches. And that would make Mr. Ilitch turn over in his grave. Mr. Ilitch was a do-anything-to-win coach. Open the checkbook, whatever the team needed to win, he gave it to them. His son, that apple fell a long way from the tree. Here in Las Vegas, you have the Las Vegas Raiders, the hapless, useless, worthless, well, not worthless, they're worth a couple of $1 billion, but their owner is the son of the legendary Al Davis, and their motto is just win, baby. Well, they just win when they want to make sure that they don't get the first draft choice in next year's NFL draft. Why I'm bringing up these two examples of bad ownership is I think that we need to really talk about Bill Foley for a couple of minutes. We mentioned him on occasion during the podcast, but he came in as a guy 8 years ago, 9 years ago when he got the team, didn't really know anything about hockey, knew he wanted to own a pro sports team, made a deal for Las Vegas. But since day one, since minute one, since word one, Mr. Foley has said, we're going to win. I'm going to do everything to win. He brought on George McPhee, who brings on Kelly McCrimmon. And the marching orders are the same thing: win Stanley Cups. And it's just incredible to me that a neophyte owner, very successful in business, obviously, can take an NHL team from concept to design to Stanley Cup in 7 years, and legacy owners, people like Chris Ilitch in Detroit, people like Mark Davis here in Las Vegas, my adopted hometown. It's embarrassing. And I think, Chris, we have to just really give some kudos to Mr. Foley, how regardless of what the fans around the league say, regardless of what anybody else says, Mr. Foley, he doesn't give one fuck. And they have not deviated one bit from the plan on day one, which is just win, baby. Sorry, Mark. We're going to steal your headline and we're going to use it too. So, Chris, talk about Mr. Foley before we get into the meat and potatoes of this.
Well, Eddie, I think, for those of us like me who are massive sports fans, and my sports fandom doesn't just incorporate hockey. It's the NBA and the NFL, and I love Premier League soccer, and actually I like soccer from all over the world. Mr. Foley has developed a portfolio of not only an NHL team, but obviously an AHL team. He, I believe, is owner of an indoor football league team, the Nighthawks, which obviously would make sense, right? Now he has an ECHL team, but he also owns two soccer clubs, one that's playing in the Premier League named Bournemouth, who are having arguably their best season in the history of the club. I mean, we're talking a club that's been around probably, I don't know the exact amount of years, but most of these Premier League clubs have been around well over 100 years. I'm guessing Bournemouth is not much different. And then just this season, he bought the rights to start an expansion club in the Australian League. Now, that team is playing actually in Auckland, New Zealand. And a handful of games, I believe 7 or 8 games into the season, that club was actually in first place. So Mr. Foley, Bill Foley, has not only proven that he's a successful NHL owner, but he wants to win at everything. And, I can't help but think about, you mentioned second generation owners. And I think a lot of times the children will sell the club. I think that happened in Denver when I think the guy who owned the Denver Broncos was, I think his name was Pat Bowlen. And when he, successful, multiple Super Bowl championships. But when he passed away, left the club to his children, they ended up selling the club to someone else. But a lot of times when children get involved, they don't have the same desire and the same work ethic and the same, I guess, hunger to win that the fathers had. And, I think I think about what happens here when Mr. Foley passes away. Does he pass the organization on to his child? I think he only has one son. Maybe he has more. I don't know too much about his family. But you want the second generation to have just as much as a desire to win as the original. And I just don't see it. You see it a lot of times with second generation players where their name gets them to the league. And, we don't really see it as much in the NHL because you look at the Kachuk brothers, and I think you can make the case that both of them are at the very least as good as Keith was.
Oh, they're both better than Keith. Come on.
And they both want to win.
Walt was great, but come on.
Like obviously Matthew is an all-world elite player, building a Hall of Fame career. Brady, he's got a little bit of a ways to go, but Matthew is phenomenal. You see it sometimes in the NBA. I mean, LeBron James's kid, he's only there because of his dad, right? He's not in the NBA if his father's not LeBron James. But that's a separate issue. I totally understand the anger and the frustration of Raider fans and Red Wing fans. Getting back to the coaching thing, Todd McClellan, who they hired, he's a good coach. Like I think he's proven that he is a good enough coach to coach in the league. The question I have is, and maybe I'm just biased because we got to work with Gerard Gallant for a few years here in Vegas. He's a Red Wing. He played with Steve Yzerman. He's a good coach. He was the Jack Adams Award winner. He's been to multiple playoffs. He's won, never won a Stanley Cup, but he's been to the Stanley Cup finals. I don't know why. And my initial thought, Eddie, and when you mentioned Mike Ilitch, my initial thought was there's a real good possibility that the buyout that Gerard Gallant is getting from the New York Rangers is probably more than what Mike Ilitch was willing to pay him to forego. I'm assuming when you take another job, you forego that buyout. Chris Ilitch, I'm sorry. So more than Chris was willing to pay. So if I'm Gerard Gallant, I'm going to hold out for a job that's going to pay me more than what my buyout is. Well, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, we don't know details as much as in other sports, but I think, maybe we spent a bit too much on this subject, but I understand your frustration. And let's just hope that when the day comes that Mr. Foley is no longer in charge and running things here in Vegas, that whoever takes over has every interest in continuing what he built here in the desert.
So there's that famous line from, I don't remember what movie, where the line is, Houston, we have a problem.
Was it Apollo 11 or 13?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Something, yeah. Well, this episode, I think, is going to be called NHL, we have a problem. And that problem is the Vegas Golden Knights. Because boys and girls, the Vegas Golden Knights at the beginning of the year were, oh yeah, they'll make the playoffs, and we're not really sure about them, and blah 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 blah. And the pundits, a lot of the pundits, were really writing them off.
Well, that's
Well,
because they love to hate this team.
and
It's
that's
easy
good,
to do.
and it's beautiful, and I love that they all hate us. But ladies and gentlemen, the Golden Knights are 36 games away, 36 games in, a few games away from the halfway point, and they are leading the NHL with a 25-8-3 record, 7.736 point percentage, first in the NHL, first in the West, first in the Pacific, 15-3 at home, 10-5-3 on the road. Oh, let's see, 9 out of the last 10, 6 in a row. And they still, Chris, are not at full strength. Nicholas Waugh, we might have jinxed, had him on the podcast. Now he's on IR. Ivan Barbashev took a nasty slew foot from one of the Foligno boys and hasn't been in the lineup since.
I did see him at the rink last night, so hopefully that means he's getting a little bit closer to return.
But ladies and gentlemen, if you had any doubts about the Golden Knights, I think you could probably pretty well put those doubts to bed. Chris, Coach Cassidy has talked about, and we've used this phrase a million times on the podcast, getting to their game. And you're never at your game when you come out of training camp, and you try to peak at the right time, which is March into April. But I'm not talking about peaking. I want to talk about getting to their game. You and I spend the last part of each episode sort of prognosticating and guessing how well the Golden Knights are going to do over a certain block of games. We talked about this 8-game stretch, and we're thinking, 16 points is probably not realistic. Well, they've got Montreal tomorrow, who, to their credit, is playing much better. Then they have Philadelphia, and then they have Buffalo. But boys and girls in podcast land, the Vegas Golden Knights are really close to finding their all-around game. And the NHL, if they're not aware, they better be aware now, because this team is a legitimate juggernaut. And I mean, I couldn't be happier. It's certainly fun to go to the rink, and it's certainly fun to talk to the players because they're enjoying the ride. But Chris, talk about, I mean, how much better are they than you thought, perhaps, or how close do you think they really are to finding, their game?
Well, I don't necessarily know if they found it yet. Like, I think there's still another level to go to this team, which is really scary if you think about it. They have exceeded my expectations by far and away. I mean, I think you look at just the goal tallies, and I think we all knew that Brett Howden had talent. Like, I think the guy was a first round pick. He scored in juniors. I think we all knew that there was talent there, but I don't think any of us foresaw 15 goals. Is that what he's up to now? 15 goals
Yeah,
for
after
Brett
last night.
Howden. By the way, my buddy had Alex Pietrangelo at 32-1 to score the first goal of the game.
Oh.
And he texted me. He's like, I need to find out who the official scorer is so I could go have a conversation with him.
It's that guy that sits above us.
Oh, I'll let him know. So, but Eddie, I mean, they're getting performances from guys. First of all, it always with this franchise starts with defense. And their blue line is fucking ridiculous. Like, I know we talk about it because we see them every single night. We don't get to watch every other team in the league every single night. There's not one team in the NHL that has a better blue line than the Golden Knights. Like, I don't care if you're some guy who watches 15 games a day, you're watching every game in the league, and you're in Toronto and you're a know-it-all. There's not one team in the league that has a better blue line, top to bottom, than the Golden Knights.
Who asked Bruce that a couple nights ago?
I think it was Alan Snell.
Right. So Bruce got asked that question, and I don't want to say that he tap danced it, but he, say we have the best defense without saying we have the best defense.
Yeah.
Right. I think he had a little, a free shot to put out to the NHL that that he thinks that they do. And I mean, listen, you think it, I think it. I think anybody that watches a lot of hockey, not just Golden Knights hockey, 1-8, not 1-6,
Yeah.
1-8, top to
Well,
bottom.
and how you can say that this team has probably the best, there's no probably, why they do have the best blue line in the NHL. You look at who that seventh guy is, Ben Hutton. Ben Hutton is in the top 6 on 31 other teams in the league. We get the lineup cards. We see who skates for, whether it's Calgary or Anaheim or Philadelphia or whatever other team comes into T-Mobile. Ben Hutton is a top 6 guy on every other team in the league outside of Vegas. I don't think Caden Korczak maybe is a top 6 guy on every team, but he's really damn close to being a top 6 guy on every single team. So, and we saw 2 guys last night who probably would be in Henderson if they were playing for the Golden Knights, and Braden Pahal and Daniil Marimonoff.
Not probably.
I mean, and those 2 guys are what are they? The second pair and the third pair defensemen for the Flames?
Yeah.
And they're in Henderson for Vegas. And you know what's crazy? Like, they have guys who they've drafted that they've traded away who were probably playing on a lot of other teams in the league. So, I mean, they just continue to overperform in that specific area. But I mean, they've by far exceeded the team in general. You talked about it. They're the only team left in the league that has single digit regulation losses. And you mentioned 8, right? 25, 8-3.
Yep.
They are doing it without Ivan Barbashev, who was their leading goal scorer when he got hurt. I think he was number 2 or 3 in points when he got hurt. I mean, they've beaten Winnipeg twice. They've beaten Minnesota. What have they won? 2 out of 3 from Edmonton.
Yep. Dallas.
They've got 2 games against Dallas coming up at the end of the month. They'll get another crack at them. I mean, they continue to exceed expectations. When everyone says they're down, when everyone says, oh, they lost too much, you take away an all-star in Chandler Stevenson, an all-star in Jonathan Marchessault. So it doesn't matter. These guys, and I talked about it yesterday with someone else, and I said, what really separates this organization from everyone else in the league is their pro scouting department. I don't, I won't go into the amateur draft, right? That's a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get. Like, the Golden Knights have never been in position to draft a Macklin Celebrini or a Connor Bedard. So forget that. But it's the guys that they sign in free agency, the guys that they trade for, the guys that they trade other players for. They know every player in the league inside and out, which is what enables them to go sign a guy like Ben Hutton off his fucking couch and win a Stanley Cup. That guy played significant minutes for this team when they won the Stanley Cup, and he was on his couch for 2 weeks during the start of the season. They are better at it than everyone else in the league because they understand everything that needs to help build a winning franchise better than anyone else. I remember when Seattle came in the league. Oh, they're going to do it a different way. You know what? The Kraken suck, and we can say it. They're not good.
How about that Matty Beniers deal?
Yeah. You know what?
First goal in 2 months. Anyway,
he was great as a rookie, but I mean,
so was I.
Yeah.
Ask my first girlfriend. Legendary. Think about this. They're leading the league in everything. I mean, standings wise, and they're doing it with a player they picked up on a professional tryout, a player that they picked up on waivers and went back and forth on waivers 3 or 4 times from Calgary, by the way, and basically a career AHL player in Tanner Lazinski, who's getting his first real cup of coffee in the NHL. So 2 of those 3 players are going to be enjoying the popcorn that you see in my background when Nick Waugh and Ivan Barbashev come back. And listen, we know it's going to be Schwint, and we know Lazinski's going to probably go back to Henderson. But they're leading the league, I don't want to say scrap heap, but because that's a super derogatory. But they're leading the league with 3 players who basically were not wanted and not considered full-time NHL players or past their NHL prime when you talk about Tanner Pearson, who scored the empty net goal last night.
300th career NHL point, by the way. He didn't even know it. He didn't
No,
even know it.
he didn't know till Cole Swint gave him the puck in the
Yeah.
room last night. But that statement validates your point 100%, Chris. They don't have to have the best of every single thing. Yes, they like shiny objects. We're not going to go into that. They'll get another shiny object at the trade deadline, whatever. The point is that they identify players who fit the needs that they have, and they scour the hockey personnel globe to find them. And like you said, that's pro scouting, right? I don't think Cole Swint was on anybody's radar.
He's a good
Right?
player. He's a good player.
He looks like he belongs 100%. And I like Tanner Lecision's game. Hasn't hit the score sheet yet, but you know what? He's noticeable on the ice. And that's a statistic that it's not a statistic, but when we sit up there and we watch the games from up above, he's noticeable. He skates hard. He plays hard, right?
Yeah.
And they got him for a song and a dance and a roll of tape. So, that's a credit not only to the coaching of Bruce Cassidy and the staff, but that's Kelly McCrimmon and the pro scouts who literally just know. And they, like you said, and you're spot on. They know exactly what they need, and they know exactly who fits the bill.
Well, it makes you question, right? They played Calgary last night. They are 12 points behind the Golden Knights in the standings. Who in Calgary made the decision that Cole Swint was not an NHL player? He's not good enough to play for a team that's 12 points behind the Golden Knights, yet he's played. I mean, I could look at probably 30 games for the Golden Knights. I mean, that's why they're so much better than everyone else. Calgary's like, yeah, this guy's not good enough. Vegas is like, guess what? He is good enough, and we're going to show you he's good enough.
Before we head into the next point, let's get a quick word in from Dr. John Pierce at Ageless Forever, my very good friend.
So if there's a little bit too much whip in the shaft of your hockey stick and you want to be able to hit the back of the net, here's your answer, but I'm not going to tell you anything about it because I'm going to let my good friend Dr. Pierce tell you exactly what this bad boy is, and prepare to be amazed.
This is the Phoenix Pro. This is a home unit to deliver extracorporeal, I call it sound wave therapy. The technical term is shockwave therapy.
Here's where we get to the fun stuff, kids.
Okay? And they applied it to their genitalia, and they found that, yes, indeed, it improves blood flow. When we talk about, male genitalia, what is an erection? It is a blood flow issue. So if you're having issues, and you've gone to see your doctor, you've had your testosterone balanced, and you're doing those things, and it's working great. If you're finding that you're using a medication like Viagra, Cialis, something like that, and you're finding less and less effect, that means that the blood flow isn't as good. Something like this can help to mitigate that issue.
So let me break this down for you in layman's terms. If your junk is more like a pool noodle than a pool cue, it's going to make your junk hard. Dr. John Pierce, Ageless Forever, www.agelessforever.net. Don't be shy. Send a message. The first consultation is free. You'll meet with Dr. Pierce personally. You'll have the ability to share whatever it is you want to share. This bad boy works. So, something for you to think about. www.agelessforever.net. Send a message. Take advantage of the free consultation, and let's get you to be the best you can be.
So, Chap, I want to talk to you about analytics for a second.
I know nothing about them.
You and I are not really analytics guys. Our friend Paul De Los Santos from Dice City Sports and NHL.com, big analytics guy. Jesse Granger from The Athletic, big athletics guy. Ken Bulkey from Sinbin likes to talk about analytics. And
yeah, they're all into that Corsi stuff.
Yeah, Corsi this, Corsi my ass. But here's what I would like to talk to you about in relation to analytics. Bruce said a couple of games ago, 2 or 3 games ago, that this team reminds him of the Stanley Cup winning team. Now, Paul was talking to me a little bit about the analytics, and that the analytics are pretty close to that year at this point in the season. But when Bruce says to us that this team reminds him of the Stanley Cup winning team of a couple seasons ago, I think that he probably has analytics as a background, to validate points that he might have. But I suspect that he is talking about how the team is playing on the ice, the feel in the room, the way that they're getting to their game. There goes that phrase again, how they got to their game. I think that it's more a touch and a feel and a see than the numbers. How much, Chris, do you think that statement is analytically based? And how much of that statement do you think is what he sees from behind the bench and running the practices and the team as a whole?
Well, I think he was asked a little bit about it last night, and I think he basically said exactly what you paraphrased, in that he uses it to validate what he sees. Now, I think, in terms of where they are, I think they're better right now than they were 2 years ago at this point in the season. Because if you remember, it wasn't until they took that road trip to New York. They lost to the Devils. I think they lost to the Rangers.
They lost
all 3
all of
games.
them. I was there.
And they
lost them
played
all.
really good on the island, but lost that game. They went into the bye week kind of limping. They came out, had the dad strip, and that's kind of when they turned it on. Following the bye week, you could sort of see it during that Islanders game that they were about to turn the page.
And they got Shea Theodore back at that point as well.
But this team, they started out 3-0 at home. They blew 3 teams off the ice. They went back east. They had that Washington Capitals game, the 2 games in Florida. They didn't play particularly well in Washington. They played better in Tampa, good enough to probably win the game. They ended up giving up 2 late goals. And then they played fairly decent in Florida. They came home. They got their shit together, played well at home. But it wasn't until that road trip where they went to Eastern Canada where you could see, all right, these guys have found something. They lost that first game to Toronto, and then they looked like a completely different team. They just ran out of gas in Colorado. 5 games, a lot of travel. So that was, for me, the turning point where they kind of turned it on. Like, you know what? These guys are for real. Since Mark Stone has come back, this team, they are the best team in the NHL. And I don't think it's particularly close. Like, you look at the games that he's played and how many points they've gotten in games he's played. I think it's something like 19 out of, I think he's played 25. I'm going to look it up exactly how many games he's played. But it's some ungodly amount of points that they've gotten. So 22 games Mark Stone has played. He's got 30 points in 22 games. But I think they're up to like 16 or 17 games where they've gotten points in games that he's played. Like, he adds such a dimension to this team. And him with Jack, I mean, it's back to a dominant first line. But to get back to your original question, I don't know how much Bruce looks at analytics as opposed to what he sees. He's clearly a very, very intelligent guy who understands the game, who sees things the way, well, people like you and me don't. But I think he's more of a see as opposed to, I'm going to look at these numbers. The numbers verify what he sees.
Yes.
But I think he's going to go with what he sees over what the numbers tell him.
Before we switch to the next topic, we have 2 more to go, I think. Actually, that last one's going to be a doozy. So don't click off the podcast just yet, because you're going to hear what's going to happen on January 26th. I promise you. But before we get to that, let's get a word for the best all-purpose, multi-talented lawyer in all of Las Vegas, Joe Riccio from the Marathon Law Group.
I'm here with Joe Riccio from Marathon Law Group. And Joe, sometimes when couples go through divorce, one of the partners will deprive the other partner of visitation with their children. Obviously, this is never a good situation for anybody. So what steps can someone take to maybe deal with this type of issue if it arises?
Well, thanks, Chris. One of the most important things you can do is make sure that you have a court order. And in the state of Nevada, over the last several years, the Nevada legislature has moved towards involving both parents and finding it best for children to be involved, or parents to be involved with both children equally, both on the legal custody and the physical custody side of things. So if you're being denied time or deprived time, whether it's in a court order or not, you definitely want to take measures to prove or at least show the court that you've been making those overt efforts and that the other side has been depriving you.
So maybe like keeping a calendar or something like that and marking when you have visitation with the child, maybe marking when you should, and if you don't get visitation on that particular day.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only could you keep a calendar log, but there's applications that the parties can get into without the court for free that allow them to communicate that the court can look at when that time is right. And then there's other mechanisms that you can engage in as well, such as text messaging and emailing and making sure you're keeping those records.
So as much as we're not analytics guys, I want to talk about a couple of things that are absolutely stand out in the Vegas Golden Knights game. Adin Hill has arrived. The Adin Hill that won the Stanley Cup has arrived. I'm not going into the wins, loss, goals against, save percentage, but the eye test, he's absolutely locked in. And for a backup goalie, right, who they picked up basically off the scrap heap from Toronto, where he just, it didn't fit for him. 4-0 in his last 4 starts. I think the goals against is about 1.25. The save percentage is in the 950s somewhere. By having Ilya Samsonov play the way he is, that absolutely maximizes the Golden Knights' potential because it gives Bruce the comfort to give Adin Hill some extra days off to make sure that he's fully rested. I mean, in the beginning of the season, we were pretty rough on Adin Hill. And I think if we would have asked Adin Hill, he'd have been pretty rough on himself. It took him a minute to find his game. There we go. Third time we've used that phrase in 27 minutes. But Adin Hill has come around. And along with Adin Hill coming around, the D has come around. And if you add those two goaltenders playing at a truly elite level, with the fact that their penalty or their power play is running at 25 and change, which is the best that it's ever been. The penalty kill in the last few games is starting to show up. A couple of shorties, a couple of fast shorties a couple of games ago, 23 seconds apart, that ended San Jose's night. I think they're 14th or 15th on the PK, but that's, with an arrow pointing up. Every aspect of their game right now is pointing to the in the right direction, going forward. Do you have any concern whatsoever that this is a peak, or do you think that this is there's still more to give? I mean, I believe that there's still a lot more to give because still in 36 games they haven't iced the actual 20. I think twice, maybe 3 times. So I don't think, as good as they are, I still don't think we quite know yet how good they can be. What do you think?
Well, I think there's always room for them to be better. I think that's the way that they approach things. Like, look, we're good, but we could always be better. I think that just comes from the leadership in the room. But as far as Adin Hill and Ilya Samsonov go, Samsonov was it was weird because he talked to us last night, but I couldn't really get like super close, so I couldn't really hear everything that he was saying. But it sounded to me like he said from day one he felt like he was home.
Yes.
Like
Comfortable.
he was very comfortable in Vegas. And, I don't know how much having two Russians, because I'm sure it's not obviously, he played in Washington. They have a couple of Russians.
Yeah, that
So
Ovechkin guy or
yeah, that
he's
number 8
Russian,
guy.
isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
8 guy?
so.
Yeah.
But
Goal scoring guy, something?
but I think from day one, and I think that's the way this organization operates. I think they bring you in, and from day one, you're part of this. You don't have to earn your way in. Like, I think the guys in the room, and it starts with Mark Stone and Jack Eichel, but you come into that room, you're one of them. And I think every player who we speak to who comes here, they always say to us, I felt comfortable right away. Noah Hannafin, there was no adjustment period. I felt like I belonged here right away. With Ivan Barbashev, I felt like I belonged here. And I think it says a lot about the leadership in the locker room when you have guys who don't feel uncomfortable when they walk in there for the first time. One of the strangest things for me, and we'll go back a long time, but Max Pacioretty and Mark Stone. When they brought in Max Pacioretty and Mark Stone, Pacioretty got here first. And they brought in Stone later in the year. But they went to war with each other when Max was in Montreal and Mark was in Ottawa.
Captains both.
They did not particularly get along, which is understandable. They got here, they buried the hatchet, they became line mates. They were captain, and there was leadership from Pacioretty. And I think that was the moment you realize, you know what, these guys are all here to win. None of them give a shit about past beefs. They brought in Ryan Reeves, who had a reputation. There were never any issues with Ryan Reeves. He was one of the boys right away. He earned it that first night, the first game he played against the Kings, and he was out there lighting people up. I think it speaks to this organization from top to bottom.
Culture. That's the
It's
word,
culture.
right?
Yes, culture. And it doesn't matter if it's Gerard Gallant or Bruce Cassidy or Pete DeBoer. There's culture here. And it's a winning culture. And a lot of teams around the league will try to emulate it, but not every team around the league will have the success. They're priming themselves to make another run.
I think that the one thing, and I was the same thing. Samsonov is a very soft-spoken guy. If you're not in the front row of the scrum, you're not going to hear it. But the one thing that I did hear when I turned my head so I could listen a little better, he said this: "My family is very comfortable." And I don't think you can emphasize enough what that means. When players come here, they bring wives, they bring children, they bring dogs, they bring cats, they bring in-laws, right? They have houses full of in-laws for holidays. This team, and it goes back to that culture word, everybody is ingratiated from minute one. Brendan Brisson stayed in Mark Stone's house, which is a tradition for NHL players. That young kids, when come up, they stay with somebody. It's been that way since forever. But this team just continues to make, well, I guess make it the ultimate destination. If you're an NHL player, you want to play for this franchise, and not just because of the tax-free status, not just because of the fact that it's going to be February and our boys can hit the golf course when Calgary's up to their asshole in snow, right? It's from the second there was a team here, from the second they announced the name and Mr. Foley brought on Marc-Andre Fleury, this team was a family. And that family, I think, is a great, important part of why this team has been so successful. So enough about statistics, enough about all that shit. I'm getting a headache thinking about all those numbers. Let's talk about something really important. Chapman, what are you doing on January 26th?
Well, Eddie, I will be at the Golden Knights Florida Panther game, a rematch of the 2023 Stanley Cup final and a matchup between the last two Stanley Cup champions. How about you?
I'll probably be sitting next to you at that game,
Yeah.
eating the stale popcorn that's probably going to be the exact same popcorn that's going to be at that game on January 26th.
The one that's behind you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, concession team. But we're burying the lead, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, let's cut the shit.
Let's cut the bullshit. It's golden giveaway time. Brought to you by our good friend Joe Riccio at Marathon Law. Here's the dealio, kids. 2 lower bowl tickets. Sunday afternoon, January 26th, 5 p.m. puck drop. Vegas Golden Knights, Florida Panthers. Chris already teed up the game. We don't need to talk much about that, but we do need to say that Joe Riccio at Marathon Law has generously given up his season tickets in the lower bowl.
Yeah.
So you get 2 lower bowl tickets. You get free parking. You get to have dinner with Chapman and I. And yes, we are going to the El Dorado Cantina on Dean Martin. So if you like Mexican food, we're going to have a little pregame snack, get to hang out with Chap and I.
Yeah, I've never been there. So I'm excited for that.
Well, you're getting the bill, pal. So
I'm not shocked.
It's a nice, easy drive right into the arena. So this is one of those shameless promotions. You need to like the podcast. You need to share the podcast. You need to comment. Let's see, what's a good word? We used tickets before. Let's use
rematch.
Stone.
I said rematch.
Stone.
Stone's better. Yeah.
Okay. So like the podcast. Share the podcast if you can. You should be able to.
Yeah.
Comment Stone to be entered in the drawing. 2 tickets, the 26th of January, 5 o'clock against the Florida Panthers. I mean, seriously. Even the other outlets that give away tickets, let's just say those tickets are a little bit higher up in the arena.
Yeah.
There's no other podcast that's giving you lower bowl tickets, plus free parking, plus a fantastic Mexican dinner pregame. We appreciate everything that you do. We appreciate that you like and you subscribe and you share. We're going to ask you to do it again. We're going to have another ticket giveaway in February. We have another ticket giveaway in March. I'm begging somebody for tickets in April, but we're going to try and do this once a month. All we're asking you to do is share this and help us grow the podcast. We're appreciative of everything you do. We're absolutely appreciative of our sponsors, the Las Vegas Advisor at lasvegasadvisor.com, by my good friend Dr. John Pierce at agelessforever.net, and by the sponsor of the Golden Giveaway, the Golden Ticket Giveaway, Joe Riccio at Marathon Law. January 26th, boys and girls.
Now, should be mentioned that in order to get those tickets, you will have to go to Marathon Law to pick up the parking, and Joe will transfer the tickets to you. But listen, if you want to go to the game, it's not a big deal to go down to the office and pick up the tickets. I mean, and you and I have been to the seats. They're fucking good seats.
Pretty good seats.
What is it, Section 4?
Yep, Section 4.
So, I mean, you're right down at the end where the Golden Knights shoot once. And, I mean, it's cool. They're great seats. So, certainly, like, subscribe, share, comment. Listen, we're at over 300, I think, followers.
We need 1,000, folks. We need 1,000 to monetize this podcast.
Yeah.
So
help us make some money. Yeah.
698 to go. Share this with your friends. Okay, that's the shameless ticket plug. Let's talk about the upcoming games real quick, and then we can get out of here.
Fuck that. Let's plug it. There's nothing shameless about it.
Oh, shameless is okay. Tomorrow, in case you don't know, this is the 30th of December. Tomorrow
Last one of the year.
Tomorrow is a 12 noon start, folks. Set your alarm. I don't know what the hell the NHL was thinking with a West Coast game starting at noon. The suddenly very hot Montreal Canadiens come in, followed by the Philadelphia Flyers on the 2nd, and then Buffalo on the 4th. Chris, we talked about it. Oh, God, I really just want to say 6 and laugh at it, but I think Montreal and Philadelphia are going to be tougher games than we suspect. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to say 5. 5 out of 6 the next 3.
I'm gonna go with 4. I think they lose one of these games. Maybe the Flyers game. Um, Tortorella traditionally he's a pain in the ass when they play the Golden Knights. He just is for whatever reason they just don't seem to play very well against his teams. So I think they will lose one. I think that's the game. I think Philadelphia, a team that they've traditionally not played great against. So that's the one. I think they'll beat Montreal. They'll head off into the new year, 7 straight wins, and then they'll come back on, Thursday? And I think they drop that one to the Flyers. They'll get back on track and beat the Sabres. Look, if you win 9 out of 10 or whatever it would be, 8 out of 9, and this stretch around Christmas and New Year's, that's pretty impressive considering.
Plus Western Conference plus division foes.
Yep.
They're really putting a lot of external pressure on the rest of the division to keep up.
Yeah, I think
Edmonton's
they're 8 points
really
up
well
on Edmonton.
Yeah, I mean, Edmonton's playing pretty well. LA's playing pretty well, but they're going to have to keep playing pretty well because there's no sign of the juggernaut that is the Vegas Golden Knights slowing down anytime soon. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Don't forget, free tickets, January 26th. Like, share, comment the word Stone. Everybody else who has entered the previous 2 drawings will automatically be entered into this drawing. So that means that you can have multiple chances to win. And we're just going to sort of keep piling up. The more you comment, the more you like, the more you share, the more chances you have to win. I mean, 1 set of tickets in the lower bowl, January, February, March, and April. I mean, it could be a lot worse, folks. You could have to listen to podcasts about Corsi for and expected goals for. And
yeah, by the
else
way,
like
and follow us on Instagram too.
Yeah, we should do that. You want to do? Yeah. If you go to HockeyNightsVegas.com, you can find all the places where our podcast is. Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, right? If you don't like to see our faces, which we both totally understand, you can listen to us on all those platforms and not have to look at us. So that's it. 93 is in the book. Episode 100 is coming soon, and we're going to have a massive episode and an announcement for that. Thank you all. Thank you, as always, our sponsors, Las Vegas Advisor, Dr. John Pierce at Ageless Forever, Joe Riccio at Marathon Law. Thanks to you for likes and subscribes and all the comments. We love hearing from all of you. We got to get out of here because we're going to have to get to bed early because there's a 12 o'clock puck drop on New Year's Eve. So we're out. Thank you very much, as always.